Welcome, listeners of WHFB AM 1060 and WIMS AM 1420, as we launch another edition of the Green Radio Network. Here on the Green Radio Network, we'll bring you a variety of green topics and the latest information on green technology and transportation. This program features environmental leaders throughout northern Indiana and the entire nation. The Green Radio Network is sponsored by NERPC, the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission, and the award-winning South Shore Clean Cities. Both entities are leaders in the environmental industry and work together to bring cleaner air and more sustainable living to northern Indiana. Now to introduce Carl Lisek, Executive Director of South Shore Clean Cities and the host of the show.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and again, welcome to our show. Today, our guest is Miss Leah Konrady. She is the president and CEO of One Region. Leah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Carl, for having me.
Well, what a beautiful day, huh? Summer is here.
I'm very happy it's
I
here.
know.
It's
I know.
time.
It is. It's awesome. So, well, we're here at the WIMS studios in Michigan City, and which is your hometown, correct?
It is my hometown.
Wow. So that is awesome. I guess,
Yeah.
from our conversations in the past, I figured that you were away for a while. You grew up here and then you moved. And tell our listeners a little bit about that.
That's right. So I grew up in Michigan City. I'm a graduate from Marquette High School.
Wonderful.
And then I went to University of Denver, and from there moved back here for a short little bit, and then moved to D.C., worked in D.C. for about 4 years, then went back to Denver, then to California, and then back to Michigan City.
We're just going to call you the world traveler, huh?
I call it the Tour de Leah.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. So as you're here to represent One Region, tell our listeners, what is One Region?
So One Region is a nonprofit, a 501c3, focused on growing population, attracting and retaining talent, and increasing household income in the 3-county regions, so Lake, Porter, and LaPorte counties.
You know, we hear a lot about the brain drain. And again, I think with, all the great things that are going on in northern Indiana, but we continue to hear about the brain drain. And I think that is really one of your missions as One Region, is to kind of solve that brain drain. And, we've got so many educated people, you as an example, that you grew up here and you moved, you came back. And again, with all these talented people, obviously we want to have jobs for them. So, it's very
That's
interesting.
right.
So I know you've been working a lot with civic engagement with the South Shore Line, the West Lake Corridor, and double tracking and the transit-oriented development projects. So tell us a little bit about Region 1's impact and efforts in that.
Yeah, so when I started with One Region about almost a year ago, or actually it is a year ago, I was looking at what was going on in the region, what some of the major projects and initiatives were, and who was doing what. And within that, I found that there was a space or a niche for One Region to serve in civic engagement. And again, with our mission being we're focused on growing population, attracting, retaining talent, and increasing household income, the South Shore Train and the Double Tracking Initiative and the West Lake Corridor Project and transit-oriented development we thought was a good fit that aligned with our mission and that we could help engage the community around what was going on with those projects. So to back up, double tracking is adding a track. So it's currently single track from Gary to Michigan City. And by putting in that double track, they can run trains on both directions simultaneously, as opposed to currently, which is one way. It's basically one-way traffic.
I see.
So in doing that, we'll cut the commute time from Michigan City to Chicago from about an hour and 45 minutes to just over an hour.
Well, that's significant.
Very significant. And so it'll have a ripple effect across the whole region. And I use Michigan City as the benchmark. So from South Bend, the commute will then be an hour and a half, which is great for even a 4-county region and the South Bend area.
Wow. Again, I know there's been some statistics recently that said the city of Chicago, the population is decreasing in the major metropolitan areas. And, I would assume that, some of those people are moving to Northwest Indiana.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think my favorite statistic, it's actually done by the Northwest Indiana Regional Development Authority, but what they found was from 1970 to 2015, the urban core of Chicago, so the city of Chicago, decreased in population by about 5%.
Okay.
Then if you look out to the Illinois suburbs of Chicago, it grew within that time by 225%.
Wow.
And if you extend that same radius into Indiana, Northwest Indiana, being a suburb of Chicago, if you will, we grew by 4%. And so if you look at that, we were saying, well, are we really capturing the growth that we could be capturing? And if you look at that same map of that area outside of Chicago into Indiana, you can look at rail lines. And so on the Illinois side, they have 490 miles of commuter rail.
Okay.
We have about 90, and that's all the way to South Bend.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we see a strong connection to rail in terms of growing population. And then the same could be said with even income. If you look at the same map and then put the data for income, household income on top of that, you'll see higher income outside of the city core of Chicago in the Illinois side than here.
So why do you think civic engagement is so important?
I think it's really important for people to be aware of what's going on. I think that having all opinions heard is critical. The best way to get to a positive solution and a solution that works for everyone would be to have, input from both the positive side. And I think sometimes you get people who are supportive of the train who are saying, yes, but I also have concerns, and these are my concerns. And then for those who are totally opposed to the train, I think it's good to have conversations about why that is and help share information about what's going on.
And then in regards to, does anything surprise you? I mean, from some of these things that you've heard about, is anything that's been surprising you? You've heard of good and bad?
Yeah,
yes.
I have heard good and bad. I mean, I think change is very hard. And in any community, I mean, I've come from a previous background of working in water infrastructure in Fresno, California. And community engagement around water infrastructure was just as challenging as this in some respects of, it's challenging to have change. It will impact certain communities, and I think in the long run, it's going to be really positive for our region.
So as you look, how do we improve as one region? As you're taking all this data, you're listening to folks from all demographics. So how do we improve?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, I think that there are so many facets that tie into that. But overall, I think it's having communication across the 3 counties, really taking a regional approach. I think by leveraging the city of Chicago would be tremendous for us. I often hear people talk about how we want Illinois to fail so that we succeed. And recently, one region hosted Governor Holcomb, and I was really happy to hear him say, we want Illinois to be successful, because if Illinois is successful, we're successful. And that's true, and I come from a family business, Konrady Plastics, which is based in Portage.
Okay.
And a good portion of our customers are actually in Illinois. So if our customers are there, and if Illinois is not succeeding, then that could impact, many businesses here, not just ours.
It's very interesting. And so you identified some regional benchmarking as one of your initiatives. What is regional benchmarking, and why is it something we should be doing here in Northwest Indiana?
Good question. Yeah, so one region in the past has done an indicators report, which compares, or basically assesses our region against our region. So we're measuring ourselves against ourselves. And I think that data is really helpful. Last year, when I had our annual luncheon, we had Mayor Cornett from Oklahoma City come, and he was our keynote speaker, and it was a fascinating talk. And what I found from that was people initially were like, well, why we have nothing in common with Oklahoma City.
Right.
Why is he coming here? And everyone that I talked to and the feedback that I received was, wow, we've learned so much, and we actually do have things in common with Oklahoma City. And from my experience of living elsewhere in the country, I think that there's so much that we can learn from other places. So I thought, well, let's take the indicators report where we've been assessing ourselves against ourselves, and let's look elsewhere to see how we measure up to places that have turned the corner with growing population, attracting, retaining talent, and increasing household income. So one region has partnered with Indiana University Northwest, Purdue University Northwest, Valparaiso University, and Center for Workforce Innovations. And we've gone through several exercises to determine what regions we want to compare to. And we've boiled it down to 3 regions that we're going to do a more in-depth dive into. So they're Hudson County, New Jersey.
Okay. Not familiar with that.
So it's like Newark, New Jersey,
Okay.
Hoboken, New Jersey. So they also, that area is leveraging New York City.
I see.
So they have that bi-state relationship. Hoboken is a really interesting turnaround story, which I'm learning more about, as to how they attracted and retained millennials.
Okay.
And some would say that they actually have an issue with retention of the millennials that they bring in.
Wow.
But they're bringing the millennials in who can't afford to live in New York City or in Manhattan.
Sure.
Then the next place we're looking at is the Pittsburgh region. And that ties more to like our history of the steel manufacturing and
Right.
steel industry. And they have actually grown in population of millennials by about 7%, like the city of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And what we found in going through this exercise was one of the main issues in talking with employers here that we have with attraction and retention of talent is perception.
That's true.
Pittsburgh has worked, and New Jersey has worked on their perception issues. And so I think that that's something we should be looking at is how did they overcome this? And then third is the Denver region. And Denver, most people, when I share Denver, they're like, well, yeah, Denver is the hip place to be.
Sure.
But it wasn't always that way. And the communities around Denver have leveraged the city of Denver to benefit their growth. And they were also losing population in the 90s, and that it's a turnaround story as well.
You know, you talk about the Denver area, and my son actually works in the Denver area, and a lot of the kids, I call them kids, they're not kids, young people that he graduated from the region have, you know, gotten their education here in Indiana, and they have left. And actually, my son was home this last weekend, and we were just discussing this, and you know, some of the things that are going on, and one of those things is the regional transportation system that Denver does have, and how it ties in with many of the communities and you know, around the Denver area. But you know, very interesting. A lot of different activities, and I see just different things that are going on in and around Northwest Indiana that are contributing to a very similar activity. You know, as we were just talking off the air. You know, how your weekend was and some of the things that you were involved with and I was involved with. And it was outdoor activities in Northwest Indiana.
That's right. Yeah, well, I've learned that in Denver, there was an article in the New York Times, and they summarized, you know, why is Denver's population growing so much with millennials? And the statistic they used was that over the last 5 years, Denver attracts 12,000 millennials per year.
Wow.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
Yeah. So why is that? And it boiled down to several factors, and it was basically the connectivity across the city. So the investment in their commuter rail system, a perception of open-mindedness or open thinking.
Yes.
The recreation outside of work. And those were really the three top things. Oh, and an entrepreneurial setting. They really thought that Denver fosters a startup culture, so startup of businesses. But in talking with Governor Holcomb, I said, you know, these are the qualities. Do you think that Northwest Indiana aligns with that, or even Indiana as a whole? And he was like, absolutely, yes. So I think we do, and that's what I try to share with people. We do have outdoor recreation. We have Lake Michigan, which is one of the greatest assets that we have. I know Congressman Visklosky and others are really focused on the Marquette Trail and improving our lakefront and making our lakefront accessible to all, which I think will benefit our region.
Well, you're listening to the Green Radio Network here on AM 1420 WIMS Radio and AM 1060 WHFB. I'm your host, Carl Lisek. We'll be right back with One Region President and CEO Leah Konrady right after this. You're listening to the Green Radio Network on AM 1420 WIMS Radio and AM 1060 WHFB. This is Carl Lisek. We'll be right back after this message.
There's nothing more important than spending time outdoors with your family. That's why it's so important to do whatever you can to keep our air clean. It's good for the environment and good for the health of your friends and family. Take a closer look at how poor quality is affecting our community. Across the 3 counties of Northwest Indiana, recent studies from the American Lung Association show that 9% of adults suffer from asthma, 4% live with chronic bronchitis, 38% have a form of cardiovascular disease, and 10% of the children in Lake and LaPorte counties struggle with pediatric asthma. Now, the number of adults with asthma is nearly that of adults with diabetes. Consider how diabetics make adjustments to their diet in order to be as healthy as possible. Everyone can make adjustments to improve air quality and the quality of life for those who live with asthma and other lung diseases. Northwest Indiana, clean air, think green, breathe easy. A message from NERPC.
Thank you again for joining us on AM 1420 WIMS Radio and AM 1060 WHFB on this edition of the Green Radio Network. Welcome back to the Green Radio Network here on AM 1420, WIMS Radio, and AM 1060, WHFB. I'm Carl Lisek of South Shore Clean Cities, here to bring you the latest information on green projects and topics across the nation. Our guest today is Miss Leah Konrady. She's the president and CEO of One Region. Leah, thank you so much for being here again today. And again, it's so interesting to hear all these different concepts and all these great initiatives that One Region's working on. And so I know that you're working on an exciting project with young professionals and millennials to help curb region brain drain. Why don't you tell our listeners what that's about?
Yeah, so One Region's looking to launch a new initiative called NWI Next Step. And it's modeled off of the other programs throughout the country where they've engaged young professionals about what they want to see for their region. Mm-hmm. And so it basically is to, one, identify, are we asking the right questions?
Sure.
If we're not asking the right questions, then we're not going to come to a solution that's really going to attract talent. So the goal is to start reversing the brain drain by having conversations with young professionals who live here to understand what it is they want to see for their future here. But I think that it'll be an ongoing initiative, so an annual initiative where the brain drain really starts in high school when students graduate from high school and go to schools like Purdue Lafayette, IU Bloomington, Ball State, and that's when the brain drain actually starts from the region. And then you have people like me who are the boomerang. They go away for 10 to 13, 15 years. And then come back for family reasons. But I think, so eventually we could reach out to high schoolers to understand what it is they want to see for their future so that we actually are identifying it when it starts. But for this year, we're going to start with young professionals, and it'll be across the 3-county region, broken out into teams, and to work on solving a problem or question that is realistic and can be solved, and then presenting that solution to regional leaders.
I see. So again, we're about green, we're about good transportation and regional transportation. And again, I know you work a lot with Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission and a lot of the local leaders. From some of the initial conversations that you've had with young professionals, is transportation or greener transportation, is that one of the topics that ever comes up, or is it more based on recreational types of activities? And
here I think it's there's two different groups. There's the group that lives here, and so they're not as, in the conversations that I have with them, it's not so much about the commuter transportation into Chicago. I often hear about traffic and the quality of our roads and how they would like to see that improved. And I think even this summer with all the construction on 94 and the toll road, people are like, why can't they coordinate this? And maybe it is coordinated, but I think the traffic gets to people. So no, I don't hear a lot about it. Now, on the flip side, those who are from Northwest Indiana who live in Chicago and are looking to move outside of the city, but to keep their jobs in the city, they don't usually look back to Northwest Indiana because of the commute time. So they look to Illinois first. So when I talk with them and share with them what's going on with double tracking in Westlake, their eyes just light up and they can't wait. So I think it's something that is on people's radar, but depending on where they live.
So why don't you give your information, so if people want to find out more about the young professionals or One Region, why don't you please share your information with them? Yeah,
so the best way to find out what One Region's doing and to keep in touch with us is to go to our website, and it's www.oneregionnwi.org. So it's ONEREGION.NWI.org.
So when are you planning some of these events? Is this something this summer, in the fall?
Good question. It's something that I think we'll start pulling together the leaders of some of the young professional groups that exist in the 3 counties. I think we'll start doing that in August, and then probably formally launch the program in, October, November.
Wonderful. Well, it's exciting. It's great to hear all these different initiatives. So I also understand you're planning a tour as part of the regional benchmarking initiative as well.
Yes. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we've picked those 3 regions to really hone in on and go to like an in-depth study regarding those 3 regions. And then we're going to pick one and do a tour in the fall, and it'll be an invite-only tour for business leaders, community leaders, and elected officials. And If that is something that's of interest to listeners, they can reach out and we can go through a process to see if it makes sense or not. But it'll be either Pittsburgh, the New Jersey area, or the Denver area is the first one. But the goal is then to do a series of tours and do all three regions over the next couple of years.
So as you talk about, your approach to business, as your approach to some of our governmental leaders, is it the deer in the headlight look, or is it the enthusiastic look? Is it the look of, we want to be educated, or is it a combination of all the above?
I wouldn't say it's ever deer in headlights. I think people are really excited about what is happening in Northwest Indiana. And granted, I've been gone recently returned after 13 years. But in speaking with leaders who have been here, they've said there's something happening that is catalytic, and there's momentum right now. And I think that from my understanding is unique. And so I think there's a lot of excitement. I really don't see the deer in headlights. I see more of the energy. I think when I do see the deer in headlights, it's more about, are we really going to do something? Like, is there going to be an action component, or are we just going to keep sitting around the table and talking and not going anywhere? So if there's not an action component, I think that we lose interest. But if we have actionable items, then I think leaders are willing to be more engaged.
Sure, and again, I think what we've seen, our practical experience has been somewhat similar, people want to do the right thing. We all want the same thing: clean air, clean water, and clean land. And I think working collectively together. You always talk about a diversity of Northwest Indiana, and that's our strength. Yeah. So which is exciting, and so. As we come to the close of our show, what are some of the other things that you want our listeners to get engaged? I know that, you talked about being gone for 13 years. What made you come back?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think what I found was everywhere I moved to, I was looking for the community that I grew up with here in Michigan City. And by the time I got to California, it just wasn't home.
Sure.
I wasn't happy professionally, and I wasn't happy personally. And I was taking a look around and saying, well, it's up to me to make the change, and I'm going to do it. So I took a bold leap and quit a job, which was necessary, and came back here. And it was the best decision I've ever made, and the hardest decision I've ever made. It was a fascinating career that I had in California, and especially in water resources. But it just didn't feel right, and I just wanted to come home.
Sure. And we're glad to have you. We're glad you're back home.
I'm
Welcome back.
Thanks.
And then, we were talking again off air a little bit about, your background is in water. And again, we've seen a lot of studies across the United States with the droughts and a lot of organizations, companies moving back to the Great Lakes area. And again, with some of the areas that we have in Northwest Indiana, Lake Porter and LaPorte counties, there's a lot of brownfield sites. There's a lot of opportunities to utilize some of the fresh water from Lake Michigan for some of those things. And again, with some of the studies that you're working on, are you starting to see the same thing?
Yeah, I think that it's an attractive region. I think the state of Indiana is attractive to businesses, and I think that Northwest Indiana is becoming more on the radar than ever before, especially for businesses. And especially like we talked about earlier with what's going on in Illinois. But I think, ultimately we do want to attract business from outside of the Chicago and Great Lakes region to come here. So
again, as we come to the close of our program, any closing thoughts?
No, I think if people want to get involved, these are 3 initiatives for 2017. Again, it's the civic engagement around the train and transit-oriented development, the benchmarking initiative and tour, and then this NWI Next Step, so a young professional engagement strategy. And I think that if people are interested in that, the best way to keep in touch is through our website. And as we have events across the region, they'll be posted on our website, and I think it'd be great to have people come. If there's an event in Lake County, I think it's great for people from LaPorte County to join, and vice versa. So, yeah, I think that's the best way to stay involved.
Well, Leah, congratulations on the great job that you're doing.
Thank you.
And we're excited to see some of the results and some of the activities, and we definitely, support your efforts. And, we look forward to the future. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here and to be back in the region.
Well, and that will do it for today's edition of the Green Radio Network. I'm your host, Carl Lisek. Thanks again to our guest, Ms. Leah Konrady. She's the president and CEO of One Region. And be sure to join us again on AM 1420 WIMS Radio and AM 1060 WHFB for the next edition of the Green Radio Network. And visit us online at SouthShoreCleanCities.org. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.